good
happy
side.
to No.
We're both bad sides.
You got your work cut out for you in that case. G'day, I'm Ben Pronk. I got out of the army last year. I served for just over 24 years. I spent most of my time in Infantry Corps and a lot of that within Special Operations, the SAS Regiment.
I'm Able Seaman Mark Daniels, and I've been serving for 7 years and currently medically discharging from the Royal Australian Navy.
Mark, why did you join the Australian Defence Force?
For me, it was an ideology. Like, I had really wanted to serve. My family's always served, and it was giving back. It was being able to serve my country, travel, and just do a job that actually made a difference.
For me, same. Bit of fun as well.
I thought a veteran was someone who had fought in World Wars or Vietnam. What exactly is a veteran today?
My personal bugbear is veterans, not someone who's necessarily old and not someone who's necessarily broken. All shapes, sizes, races, creeds, genders. I think the idea of a veteran is someone who's served, and it's probably as simple as that.
Yeah, I think as soon as you sign on that dotted line, you then become a veteran as soon as you transition out.
Yeah. Easy question. A modern veteran's piss week? You never heard about PTSD in my day.
I mean, that's the perception at the moment. And I think it's because it's socially acceptable now to talk about it. I know my grandfather, he never spoke about it. And every time I tried to talk to him about what he did in the Navy, he didn't acknowledge it. He just said, no, that's not what we talk about. And I think that generation was so shut off that today it's socially acceptable to talk about your feelings. It's easy to talk about PTSD. And I think it's a much better thing. I don't think it means we're piss weak. I think, if anything, we're stronger because we're willing to break down those barriers and talk about our issues instead of bottling them up. Being broken people.
And I think, I mean, in many ways, conditions of service have been better. I look at, that awful imagery of the trenches of World War I and, the living conditions in those past conflicts. And part of me feels a bit piss weak, bad day in Uruzgan province was the Wi-Fi going out. But, nonetheless, I think Australian soldiers, sailors and airmen, airwomen, still strong, good, motivated Australians.
100%.
Yeah.
Soldiers sign up knowing they are training for war. So why should we care when it comes undone?
There's a bit of truth in that. People go in, it's a non-conscript army, people go in as volunteers. But I think there is a nobility in service within defence, just as there is in a lot of first response, police, fire, ambulance as well, that I think maybe we owe a bit to them. Anyone who does through their job something that protects us all, I think is worthy of a bit of a tip of the hat and potentially a helping hand if they need it. Why do so many modern veterans have physical injuries and PTSD when they haven't been deployed or seen conflict?
Well, I think even for myself, I haven't seen conflict, but yet I've lost a leg. And as soon as people see me, they automatically go, oh, did you lose that overseas or in Iraq? And I go, no, I don't. I'm serving, but yeah, I didn't lose it over there. I think in today's society, it's actually easier to stay within defence with these issues. Defence is becoming more accommodating, which means, I suppose, that more people are then serving and staying longer in defence with those issues.
And I reckon your point earlier that we're getting much better at diagnosing and talking about these issues. I look at a lot of the Vietnam veterans, that sort of era, where it wasn't as kosher to talk about it and to have those support mechanisms. And I think there was a lot of PTSD that was undiagnosed back in those days.
Yep.
How messed up are you?
How do you judge that? Is there a scale? A scale of 1 to 10? Yeah, I'm pretty messed up. I'm trying to deal with it at the moment. I tried to hide a lot of it because I didn't want to get kicked out of defence, which when I actually realised that I spoke about it, defence was a lot more encouraging than I actually thought they would be. I think hiding it and trying to just push it aside so we could get back into service was one of my biggest mistakes. Now, 3.5 years later, I'm having to deal with the PTSD and things that I probably could have dealt with years ago. It's resulted in me getting discharged due to not coping, and I'm having a lot more side effects from the prosthetic. But yeah, I suppose, but then I look at people like yourself that have actually seen combat and you feel like you're not entitled to be as messed up. And that's the hard thing, because you put that on yourself, even though like none of the people that have actually served overseas will put that on you. You put it on yourself.
And that's the funny thing, because from my perspective, I'm fortunate in that I haven't experienced any mental health issues to date, touch wood. But it's not a relative scale, is it? It's depending on, the stuff we've seen, we felt in control maybe, or whatever it was.
What's the most traumatic thing that's ever happened to you? For myself, December 2015, we returned from deployment, and 3 days later I was hit on my motorbike and it ended up in an above knee amputation. The first words as soon as I came out of my coma was, when can I go back to sea? All you care about when you've served is just doing your job and getting back into it. I didn't care that I lost my leg. All I cared about was the impact it was then going to have on my job. I think it's a hard thing to have that taken away from you.
I've certainly, a couple of times, one IED blast in Afghanistan sort of sticks in my mind in terms of just the chaos that was around. But it was also just so reassuring that the people that were around me just instantly straight into action. They were tending to the wounded, they were getting control of the situation, and that old cliche, the training just kicked in. Do all ex-military people drink heaps of booze, pop pills, and get aggro with their partners?
I think a lot of us all have demons, and I think a lot of us turn to what we know. I know for myself, I've turned to alcohol in the past.
Yeah.
It's helped me deal with my demons then and there, but in the long term, it hasn't. There's probably a bad misconception, and I think the issue is that it's people not dealing with their mental health. It's people trying to suppress those anger issues and the things that come along with PTSD. So they're either drinking, and in return with the drinking, you then get aggressive. And that's what you hear in the media. You don't hear about all the good things veterans are doing. You just hear about these things.
And I think maybe back in the day, you can't talk about it, you bottle it up, and so the only outlet is that self-medication, whereas I certainly reckon we're getting a lot better, a lot smarter at dealing with some of these things.
Yeah.
With so many organisations out there to help ex-servicemen and women, why do so many of you struggle?
I think a lot of us struggle to, one, accept the help, and two, actually admit that we need it. I think, there's great organisations that do some amazing things, but it takes a really strong person to actually say, look, I'm not coping.
I think there's a culture within defence of being strong and resilient. That's part of what we recruit for and part of what we hope people will do in times of conflict. And sometimes that translates into too much bravado and not being able to reach out for help. And as you say, it's the really courageous, strong people who actually can do that when they need some help. The other thing that I reckon, why do so many people struggle? I reckon it is precisely because there are so many people wanting to help. And I think organisations like what RSLWA is doing with Veteran Central Soldier Central being able to bring people back in to one single spot where, it cuts through all that confusion and they can find the best avenue for help. Yeah. I reckon it's a step in the right direction.
Instead of having all the different places, you've got that one banquet of veteran services.
Yeah.
Is this why so many veterans seem like basket cases?
You're referring to me.
I'm just reading the card.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. How hard is it for you to settle back into civilian life, and why?
I'm still serving currently.
Yep.
But I'm dreading it. All I've known since I left high school is military.
Yep.
So now actually finding out how I be a civilian and tailor everything, even like how, I suppose, switched on you are all the time to an everyday environment. I'm kind of nervous about it. What are your hopes for the veterans of tomorrow?
I very much hope that we're able to translate that same sense of service that was so front and centre within our defence careers into our wider roles as part of society. I think there is something common that bonds people who serve others, as we spoke about, whether that's defence, police, fire, ambulance, these sort of professions. And that doesn't need to stop when you take the uniform off.
What do you want the public to do to help?
I think there is a requirement for both that understanding, so maybe learning a bit more, maybe looking past the stereotypes and seeing, I guess, the positive aspects of what defence gives to veterans, and not just the negative. And then quite obviously money is a thing, and that's why we hold fundraising events, but none of this happens for free. And the Veteran Central concept, which, as we've discussed, is a really positive way of making life easier for people who are struggling, easier to get help, easier for them, easier for their families.